The wind on Haven 6 always carried a soft sound, like a distant song that never fully ended. It passed through silver trees, blew across glowing blue flowers, and moved gently between the small houses where humans and Astran aliens lived together in peace. On this frontier world, life was slow, quiet, and full of wonder. It was here that an 8-year-old human boy named Evan Hale met a young Astran girl named Lyria for the first time. Evan was small for his age, curious, and always ready to explore. He spent most of his time running through the forest with tools he borrowed from his father's workshop. Lyria, on the other hand, was graceful and soft-spoken, with shimmering eyes that looked almost like stars. No one on Haven 6 knew that she was not an ordinary Astran child. She was the daughter of the Astran Queen, brought to the frontier world for quiet training and observation. But to Evan, she was simply Lyria, his strange but interesting friend. Their friendship began on a warm afternoon when Evan saw her trying to fix a damaged learning device. It lay on the ground, its small lights blinking weakly. Lyria looked frustrated but calm. Evan approached her slowly, unsure if she wanted help. When she noticed him, she smiled shyly and asked if he knew how to fix things. Evan did not know much, but he tried anyway. They sat together for an hour, talking and laughing, until the device finally lit up with a clear glow. Lyria looked at Evan like he had done something magical, even though he knew he had only guessed his way through. From that day, they spent almost every free moment together. They collected glowing stones near the river, built tiny shelters from fallen branches, shared snacks, and learned each other's languages. Lyria enjoyed asking about Earth, especially about simple things like rain, music, and pets. Evan, in return, asked endless questions about stars, faraway worlds, and the Astran royal city. Lyria tried answering, though she often stopped mid-sentence, as if she had been told not to reveal too much. One afternoon, while they walked through a field covered with long silver grass, Evan noticed Lyria seemed quieter than usual. She walked slower, her steps small and careful, like someone carrying a heavy thought. Evan asked if something was wrong. Lyria looked at him with eyes full of sadness and said she had heard something from her caretakers. She would be taken back to her empire soon. The words hit Evan like cold rain. He did not want to lose his best friend. Lyria explained that once she returned home, she would begin strict royal training. She would not be allowed to play outside, explore forests, or talk freely with anyone. She would be surrounded by guards, advisors, and rules. She lowered her head and whispered that she did not want to go. Her voice shook slightly, even though she tried to sound strong. Evan listened quietly, his small fists curling at his sides. He did not understand politics or responsibility. He only understood that his friend was scared and would be taken away. So, without thinking too much, he stepped in front of her and said something from his heart. He said that when they grew up, he would marry her someday. Then she would not be alone, and she could choose her own life. The words sounded strange and serious even to him. But he meant them. Lyria froze, surprised, then slowly smiled. A small tear appeared at the corner of her eye as she asked if he really meant it. Evan nodded as strongly as he could. Lyria made him repeat the promise again and again until she felt comforted. Finally, she whispered that she believed him. For the next few days, they enjoyed every moment together. They carved their names into a stone near the river and said they would remember that spot forever. They shared stories until the sun set, and even tried to build a tiny wooden tower as a symbol of their friendship. But the tower fell apart each time, making them laugh until their sides hurt. Evan thought the world would always stay like this, peaceful and bright. But a week later, everything changed. Huge Asteran royal ships arrived above Haven 6, glowing with golden light. Their thunderous engines shook the ground. Evan ran out of his house, searching for Lyria, but she was already surrounded by guards in tall silver armor. She stood quietly, her expression hidden behind a composed mask. But Evan saw the sadness in her eyes. He tried to run to her, but an Astran guard gently held him back. Lyria looked at him one last time. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say goodbye, but her escort pushed her forward, and she disappeared inside the ship. The royal vessels rose into the sky, leaving behind a glowing trail. Evan watched until the last spark vanished, his chest aching. The promise he made echoed in his mind. But he had no idea if she remembered it, or if she ever would again. Years passed. Haven 6 continued to grow, and so did Evan. He trained in the Human Fleet Academy, driven by the memory of a small girl with star-like eyes and a heart full of quiet courage. He learned to fly ships, solve conflicts, and protect others. His classmates noticed he never complained, no matter how difficult things became. Evan carried a sense of silent purpose. He kept a small glowing stone in his pocket, the one he and Lyria had found near the river, and it reminded him of the promise he had made. He did not know if it still mattered, but he refused to forget. Meanwhile, the galaxy changed. The Astran Empire, once powerful and calm, faced growing unrest. Rumors spread through trade stations that someone was trying to take the throne. There were whispers of palace attacks, hidden betrayals, and soldiers disappearing. The alliance between humans and Astran grew tense, though no one wanted open conflict. Many believed the Astran royal family was in danger. Evan heard these reports often. Sometimes he wondered if Lyria was safe. Sometimes he wondered if she even remembered a boy on a faraway planet. But time kept moving, and duty kept him busy. He traveled from world to world, helping civilian ships, protecting small colonies, and building a strong record as an officer who cared deeply for others. His crew trusted him, even admired him for his calm nature and strong sense of responsibility. One cold evening, while Evan's ship drifted above a quiet trade moon, he stood alone near the observation window. Stars stretched endlessly around him. He pressed the glowing stone in his pocket, a habit he had carried for years. He whispered, almost without realizing it, "I hope you're safe, Lyria." He knew it was foolish to talk to an empty sky, but part of him still felt that the universe listened. Then, on the very next day, something strange happened. While his crew was checking long-range signals, an unusual pattern appeared on the screen. It was a soft pulse of sound, repeating again and again. The communication officers tried decoding it, but failed. Then one officer looked closer and said the rhythm matched the Astran royal tone, an emergency code used only by members of the royal family. Evan felt a sudden chill pass through him. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with a strange and powerful hope. The crew tried clearing the signal, adjusting frequencies, and removing static. Slowly, the message became clearer. It was faint and full of distortion, as if it had traveled a huge distance. Evan stepped closer, eyes focused entirely on the speaker. The signal crackled loudly, then softened into a trembling whisper. The voice was weak, tired, and struggling, but unmistakable. "Evan, please, I need you." Evan froze. The room fell silent. Every crew member turned toward him, surprise written on their faces. They knew the name Lyria from old stories he had shared during long journeys. Nobody had expected this. Evan stood perfectly still, unable to breathe for a moment. He had imagined many times what it would feel like to hear her voice again, but the reality was so much stronger. It felt like the past had reached out across the stars and touched his heart. The message repeated, softer each time. Evan closed his hand over the glowing stone, feeling its smooth surface warm against his palm. He whispered her name under his breath. Lyria was alive. She remembered him, and she was calling for him. Without hesitation, he ordered the ship to follow the coordinates hidden inside the message. His crew trusted him, so they prepared for departure immediately. But Evan stood by the window for a last moment, staring into the dark horizon. His childish promise was never forgotten, and now, across light years of distance and years of silence, the girl he once promised to marry had reached out to him. He did not know what waited for him at the other end of space. Danger, war, or something even worse. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would go to her. Evan had faced dangerous missions before, but nothing felt as heavy or personal as the journey he was about to make. As soon as the coordinates from Lyria's message were decoded, his ship turned toward a distant part of the galaxy, an empty region with no trade routes, no colonies, and no patrols. It was the kind of place someone would hide if they were running from powerful enemies. His crew noticed the change in his expression. The usually calm and focused captain looked both hopeful and tense. Many of them had heard bits of the story about the Asterin girl from his childhood. They had always assumed it was simply a sweet memory, something he thought about when he was alone. But now it was clear that the connection was real, and maybe deeper than any of them had guessed. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, making the stars outside stretch into long, white lines. Evan stood near the front viewport most of the time, watching the silent streaks of light slide past. His hands stayed wrapped around the glowing stone he had carried since he was a child. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered Lyria's voice from the message. Weak, afraid, but still calling his name. Hours passed before the ship slowed down and drifted into a dark, cold region of space. The stars here were dim, and there were no signs of civilization, only silence and emptiness. The coordinates pointed toward a single small signal, so faint that it barely registered on the scanners. Evan's crew carefully moved closer, their screens glowing with static until finally an object appeared. It was a damaged Asterin shuttle. Parts of it were burnt, and its engines flickered like dying candles. Evan felt his heart pound hard in his chest as he ordered the docking procedure. The shuttle looked like it had been running for too long at low power, trying desperately to stay alive. There were no signs of heat signatures inside, no movement, no obvious life, but the message had come from here. He was sure of it. Once the docking completed, Evan was the first to step inside, wearing a protective suit in case the air system had failed. The interior was cold, almost frozen. Lights blinked weakly along the walls. A few small objects floated slowly in the air, showing the ship had lost gravity balance. Evan moved quickly, searching every corner of the shuttle until he reached the last room. There, lying on the floor near the control seat, was Lyria. She was older now, her features sharper and more elegant than the small girl he remembered. Her long silver hair lay across the floor like strands of starlight. And her breathing was shallow. A royal Asterin emblem was still attached to her uniform, though it was torn and scratched. Evan rushed to her side and checked her pulse. It was weak, but she was alive. As his hand touched her shoulder, Lyria's eyes slowly opened. They were the same glowing shade he remembered, soft, bright, and full of emotion. She took a moment to focus, then whispered his name, barely audible. Evan felt a wave of relief so strong that his knees nearly gave out. He helped her sit up gently, supporting her weight as she tried to regain her strength. Lyria told him she had escaped from an attack on her home. A rebel faction inside the Asterin Empire had tried to overthrow her family. Her mother, the Queen, was missing. Her advisors were scattered. Lyria had fled with only a few loyal guards, but one by one they were lost during the chase across the stars. Eventually, only she remained. When she realized she had nowhere safe to go, she remembered something she had held inside her heart since childhood. She remembered a boy on Haven 6 who looked at her with kindness and made a promise with sincerity so pure that even years of royal training could not erase it. She knew she could trust that boy, now a grown human officer, more than she could trust anyone in her collapsing empire. That was why she sent the message to him. Evan listened quietly, his heart aching with every word. He helped her stand and guided her carefully back to his own ship. His crew stared in surprise when they saw the alien girl they had heard so much about. Some bowed politely, knowing she was royalty. But Lyria only smiled weakly and said she was grateful for their kindness. Evan quickly ordered medical care and gave her a warm place to rest. Over the next few hours, Lyria regained a bit of her strength. Evan stayed near her room, and sometimes she opened her eyes just to make sure he was still there. When she could finally speak properly, she asked if he truly remembered the promise he made as a child. Evan looked down, a little embarrassed, but answered honestly. He told her he had never forgotten it, not even once. Lyria's face softened. She said that during the cold nights in the palace, when she felt alone or unsure about her future, she would whisper to herself, "The human boy said he would marry me someday." It was silly, she admitted. She knew humans often made playful promises as children. But she held on to those words because they made her feel warm in a world that often felt too strict and too lonely. Evan felt his chest grow tight. He realized she had carried the promise just as strongly as he had. It was not simply a memory to her. It had been a comfort, a hope, and a reason to believe in something beyond duty and royal expectations. But their emotional moment was interrupted by a loud alarm. The ship's sensors detected approaching vessels. Evan ran to the control room. Multiple signatures appeared, Astran warships, but not loyal ones. They were rebels, hunting for Lyria. They must have traced her message somehow. Evan felt a sharp fear he had never felt before, not for himself, but for her. The rebel ships opened fire without warning. Bright beams flashed across the darkness, hitting Evan's ship with powerful force. He ordered immediate maneuvers, and his crew reacted quickly, shifting the ship away from the line of fire. But the rebels were fast, and more ships were arriving from behind. It was a trap, and they were dangerously outnumbered. Evan returned to Lyria's room, and she struggled to sit up when she heard the alarms. She told him that the rebels wanted to control the Empire and would destroy anything in their way. If they captured her, they would either imprison her forever or use her as a tool to claim legitimacy. She looked into Evan's eyes and said she trusted him more than anyone alive. Evan made a decision. They could not fight here. They had to escape. Using Lyria's knowledge of secret Astran routes, they set a course for a hidden world where one of her loyal commanders might still be alive. The journey would be dangerous, and the rebels would chase them through half the galaxy, but they had no other choice. Evan's ship leapt into faster-than-light travel, dodging enemy fire at the last second. The rebel ships followed like silent shadows, refusing to give up. For hours, Evan and his crew calculated jumps and changed routes, trying to lose their pursuers. Lyria remained close to Evan, guiding him through forgotten star pathways and abandoned navigation lines. Along the way, Lyria and Evan talked more. She told him how she had grown up surrounded by rules and expectations. Every step she took was watched, every decision judged. She was taught to be perfect, strong, and emotionless. But she never forgot the boy who promised to protect her when they were young. Evan, in return, told her about his life in the human fleet, the training, the missions, and the moments when he wondered where she was. A strange warmth grew between them again, not childish this time, but real and deep. But their journey soon reached a dark turning point. When they finally arrived at the secret world where Lyria's loyal commander was supposed to be hiding, they found destruction instead of safety. The small base had been attacked. Burn marks covered the ground. Broken vessels lay scattered around. Evan and Lyria searched the area, hoping to find survivors, but everything was silent. Then they found a recording device half buried under rubble. Lyria activated it, and a hologram flickered to life. It showed her commander, battered and wounded, explaining that he had discovered a betrayal inside their ranks. Someone had leaked the secret routes to the rebels. He warned that the rebellion was more powerful than they thought. Before he could say more, the hologram was cut off by a blast. Lyria stood frozen. Evan felt a chill go through him. The commander had probably been taken captive, or worse. Before they could react, alarms blared again. Rebel ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel above them. The trap had followed them even here. Evan grabbed Lyria's hand, telling her she would not be alone this time. He told her he would keep his promise, not out of duty, but because he cared deeply for her. Lyria's eyes shined with a mixture of fear and hope. She whispered that she believed in him, just like she did when they were children. The enemy ships descended. Evan's crew prepared for one final escape, but it was clear they could not run forever. The rebels were closing in from all sides, ready to strike. Evan knew what he had to do. He positioned himself between Lyria and the danger, fully determined to protect her no matter what happened next. Because promises were not meant to be broken, especially not this one. The sky above the ruined outpost was dark and heavy, filled with swirling dust clouds that glowed faintly under the light of the rebel ships arriving one after another. Evan's ship sat near the edge of a broken cliff, engines humming with unstable energy. His crew hurried inside, preparing for the worst. Lyria stood close to Evan, her hand still in his, her expression pale but determined. The rebel ships formed a circle around the planet, creating a silent but deadly trap. Evan watched them through the viewport, feeling his heart tighten. They were surrounded from every direction. Running was impossible now. Fighting alone would be suicide. But he had never backed away from protecting someone who needed him. And he would not start now, not with Lyria standing beside him, trusting him with her life. The lead rebel ship opened a channel. A tall Astran officer appeared on the screen, his eyes cold and filled with arrogance. He said that Lyria, the last surviving royal heir, must surrender immediately. If she did, they would spare Evan's crew. If she did not, they would destroy everyone on the planet. The threat was clear, sharp, and cruel. Lyria took a small step forward, her voice steady despite the fear inside her. She told the rebel officer that she would not surrender to traitors. She warned him that the true Asteran people would resist their false rule. The officer laughed, saying the royal line was finished and she was only delaying the inevitable. Evan interrupted him, telling the rebels that they underestimated humanity's strength. The officer ignored him with a dismissive wave. The channel closed, leaving only silence. Evan turned to Lyria. She looked up at him, trying to appear strong, but he could see the worry in her eyes. She whispered that she did not want anyone to die because of her. Evan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, telling her she was not the cause of this. The rebels had chosen violence. They had decided to destroy peace. Protecting her was not a burden. It was something he wanted to do, something he felt deeply in his heart. The crew waited for Evan's decision. He stood silently for a moment, thinking, planning, hoping. There had to be a way out. Then suddenly, the ship's long-range sensors flashed with new alerts. Multiple vessels were arriving through the far side of the star field. Evan's crew gasped as they identified the signatures. It was a human fleet. Dozens of ships jumped into the system, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support craft. Their arrival painted the dark sky with lines of brilliant white light. At the center of the formation was the flagship of Admiral Rain, one of the most respected human leaders. She opened a channel immediately, her voice echoing through Evan's ship. She said that Evan had saved countless lives across the frontier. He was loyal, brave, and trusted. When he sent out a distress beacon, they answered without hesitation. She also said that humans protect those who have faith in them. If a princess trusted Evan enough to call for help, then the human fleet would stand with her too. Lyria closed her eyes in relief. Evan felt a rush of gratitude toward his people. He had always believed that humanity had a strong heart. This moment proved it. The rebels, however, panicked. They had not expected a human fleet this large or this swift. They pulled back, regrouping, and prepared for battle. Admiral Rain gave the order. The human fleet moved like a single giant creature spreading its wings. Engines roared, shields activated, weapons powered up. The battlefield lit up like a sky full of fireworks as both sides clashed. Human ships used bold, unpredictable tactics, sharp turns, sudden bursts of speed, and formations designed to confuse the rebels. Astran ships fought with elegance and precision, but they were unprepared for the raw creativity and determination humans displayed. Evan's ship joined the battle. The crew worked with intense focus, dodging beams and firing back with everything they had. The ground below trembled from distant explosions. Lyria stayed near the control area, watching the screens with wide, fearful eyes. She felt guilty for the bloodshed, but she also felt hope rising inside her. Evan guided the ship through enemy lines. His movements were smooth and confident. He had trained for years for situations like this, and now he was fighting not only for peace, but also for someone he cared for deeply. Every time the ship shook from a nearby blast, Lyria held onto the edge of the console, silently praying he would stay safe. In the middle of the battle, Admiral Rain sent a direct message to Evan. They had located the rebel flagship, the very heart of the uprising. If they could disable it, the rebellion's power would collapse, but the flagship was shielded by a strong outer ring of escort ships. No fleet could break through safely, only a small vessel could slip inside. Evan understood immediately. He knew what he had to do. He volunteered his ship for the mission, knowing it was risky. His crew agreed without hesitation. They had served with him for years. They trusted him completely. He explained the plan to Lyria. She immediately insisted on going with him. Evan refused at first, wanting her to stay safe behind stronger shields, but Lyria looked at him with firm, emotional determination. She said she was done running. Her people were suffering. Her family was gone. She had a duty, not just as a royal, but as someone who wanted to protect her people. And she trusted Evan more than she trusted anyone else. Evan hesitated but finally agreed. Together they boarded a small tactical craft, leaving the main ship behind. The craft shot through the chaos of the battlefield, weaving between explosions and debris. Enemy ships fired at them, but Evan dodged with precise movements, guided by instinct and experience. The closer they came to the rebel flagship, the darker the sky became. Large metallic structures towered above them, glowing with red lines of energy. The flagship was enormous, almost like a floating city. It radiated power and danger. Evan and Lyria could feel the tension inside the small craft. They landed in a maintenance hangar, avoiding detection. Inside the flagship, the corridors were cold and silent, lit only by soft red lights. Lyria moved beside Evan, her steps cautious but steady. They followed a path shown on the internal maps Lyria had memorized during her childhood training. They eventually reached a control chamber at the center of the ship. Inside was the rebel commander, the same man who had spoken earlier through the screen. He had a cruel smile when he saw them. He said he had expected Lyria to run forever, but he admired her courage for coming straight to him. He insulted humanity, calling Evan a foolish boy who believed in fantasies from childhood. Evan ignored the insults. He stood in front of Lyria, blocking the commander's path. Lyria spoke firmly, demanding he stop the rebellion. She said he had no right to destroy peace or lie to their people. The commander laughed and declared that the royal family was weak. Only he could rule with power. He activated a plasma weapon. Evan immediately stepped forward, shielding Lyria with his body. The commander hesitated, surprised by Evan's instinctive act. Evan used that moment to push forward, knocking the weapon aside. The two men clashed briefly. Evan fought with the strength of someone who had trained for years, but more importantly, with the determination of someone protecting someone precious. During the struggle, Lyria accessed the control panel. She used her royal clearance to override the flagship's systems. With trembling fingers, she activated a sequence that shut down the entire ship's engines and weapons. The floor shook as power drained from the massive vessel. The commander tried to stop her, but Evan held him back until the sequence finished. When the flagship went dark, human ships immediately noticed the drop in enemy coordination. Admiral Rain ordered a final advance. Without their flagship's support, rebel ships began retreating or surrendering. The rebellion collapsed. Evan and Lyria returned to their craft and escaped just before the flagship's backup systems triggered an automatic lockdown. When they reached the human fleet, cheers erupted across the channels. Lyria was safe. The rebellion was broken. Peace would return. The Astran loyal forces arrived soon after. They took control of the remaining rebel ships and offered gratitude to the humans who had saved their future. Lyria stood before the combined crews, her posture straight, her eyes shining with quiet strength. She announced that the Astran Empire would rebuild peacefully and humans would be honored allies. Then she turned toward Evan. She stepped close, her voice soft but clear enough for nearby officers to hear. She asked if he remembered the promise he made when they were children. Evan felt warmth spread through him as he answered yes. Lyria smiled gently. She said that throughout her life, through loneliness, danger, and fear, that promise had been her light, and Evan had kept it, not with words but with actions, bravery, and loyalty. She said she wished to keep her part of that promise too. The galaxy watched as an alien princess and a human officer stood side by side, not as symbols of politics, but as two souls connected by a promise made in innocence and fulfilled with courage. Evan took her hand. Lyria leaned slightly closer, and for the first time in years, both felt a deep, quiet peace, knowing that the bond they formed as children had grown stronger than war, distance, or time. Their worlds would unite. Their people would learn from their example, and their promise, once small and simple, would become a story told across the stars.